Most people put the cost of driving from New York City to Miami at around $200. That figure is the gas. About 51 gallons, a tank and a half, or roughly $199 to drive south until the route ends. The gas math is correct. It also accounts for only about a quarter of what the drive actually costs. The full figure is over $700. The rest is spread across costs that rarely get counted. The part most people get right is the route itself. New York to Miami is about 1,280 miles straight down I-95. An average sedan does 25 miles per gallon, which works out to about 51 gallons of fuel. The route crosses 8 states, and gas is priced differently in each one. Weighted by the miles spent in each state, the average comes to about $3.89 a gallon, slightly below the national average of $4.16, because the cheaper southern states make up most of the drive. 51 gallons at $3.89 is $199. That is the baseline. Tolls are lower than the corridor's reputation suggests, at least heading south. Leaving Manhattan, the George Washington Bridge is free, because that toll is collected only on the way into New York. The New Jersey Turnpike, end to end, costs about $14 with Easy Pass. Delaware's short stretch of I-95 charges $5 flat. Maryland's section is also free southbound, since its toll applies only to northbound traffic. Florida's I-95 is toll-free, the entire way into Miami. The full 1,200-mile drive therefore costs about $19 in tolls, less than a tenth of the fuel bill. Some trip calculators estimate $45 to $90 for this route, which runs 2 to 4 times high for a southbound trip. That brings the running total to $218 for gas and tolls. It is also where most estimates stop and where they go wrong. A car costs money to operate beyond the fuel it burns. Every mile adds depreciation, since the vehicle is worth slightly less at the end of the trip than at the start. Each mile also draws on insurance, maintenance, and tire wear. AAA tracks these together as a single figure it calls the true cost per mile, and for a small sedan that figure is just under 56 cents a mile, fuel included. Within that 56 cents, fuel accounts for only 13 cents. The largest single component is depreciation, at nearly 29 cents a mile, more than double the cost of gas. Fuel is visible at the pump, while depreciation is not, but depreciation is the larger expense, and it accrues across the entire trip. Applied to this route, the figure is direct. 56 cents a mile across 1,280 miles puts the true all-in cost of driving the sedan to Miami at $715. Fuel represents about 13% of that total. The rest was always part of the cost, simply uncounted. Some of those costs accrue whether the car is driven or parked. Counting only the money felt directly on this trip, fuel and maintenance produces a figure of about 24 cents a mile, or $308 out of pocket. The honest range for driving runs from roughly $300 in direct cash to $700 all in. Time is the next factor. The drive is about 19 hours behind the wheel. With stops for fuel, food, and rest, it becomes a 2-day trip with one overnight stay. A hotel room near the midpoint runs between $130 and $165. Including that night, the all-in driving total climbs past $850. An electric car changes this only partly. Charging the full route on public fast chargers runs about $125 to $175, roughly what the same trip costs in gas. The savings appear before departure charging at home, where filling the battery costs closer to $14 to $18. On a long trip that relies on public chargers, the fuel advantage largely disappears. Flying is the alternative the question turns on. A typical one-way fare from New York to Miami is around $150. Fares as low as $48 appear, but those are deal prices rather than the standard rate. A checked bag adds $35 to $45, and ground transport at the destination, by Uber or rental, adds about $30. For a solo traveler, flying lands at roughly $215 from door to airport to South Beach and takes about 6.5 hours in total, airport time included, against the better part of 2 days by car. For one person, the comparison is clear. Flying costs about $215 and 6.5 hours. Driving costs $300 in direct cash, $700 all in, and consumes most of a weekend. Counted door to door, the plane saves about 15 hours over the 2-day drive. For a solo traveler, driving does not win on any measure. The result reverses with passengers. A car costs the same whether it carries one person or four, while air travel scales with every seat. A solo flight comes to about $215. 2 people flying costs about $430, and 4 people about $860, while the driving cost barely moves because the gas, the tolls, and the wear on the car are already being spent regardless of who is in it. The answer flips at about 2 passengers. Below that, flying is cheaper. Above it, driving pulls ahead and keeps widening its lead with each additional traveler. For a family of 4, the same sedan, even at the full $700 all-in cost, comes in below $860 in plane tickets, and the gap is far larger against the out-of-pocket driving figure of about $300. Passenger count decides this trip more than distance does. The same 1,280 miles can be the expensive option or the cheap one depending only on how many people share the car. Current conditions affect both options. June is the most expensive month to fly this route, with fares about 30% higher than a year earlier. Gas is near a high as well, having peaked at $4.55 a gallon in late May, up 54% in a matter of weeks, before easing back toward $4.16. Both the pump and the plane ticket sit near recent peaks, so the totals in this comparison are closer to the high end of their normal range than the low end. For anyone with flexible travel dates, that timing is worth weighing. The conclusions follow from the numbers. A solo traveler saves money and roughly a day and a half by flying, since the trip takes about 6.5 hours in the air against the better part of 2 days on the road. At about $215 all in, that flight undercuts even the out-of-pocket cost of driving, which runs close to $300 before a hotel is added. A group of 3 or 4 saves by driving, as 4 tickets add up quickly at $150 apiece before bags and ground transport, reaching about $860 against a sedan that costs $700 all in and far less in direct cash. A few of those costs are within the traveler's control. An EZ pass is worth having before departure, since the southbound tolls total only about $19 and the cash rate runs higher. Charging an electric car at home before leaving holds the fuel cost to about $14 to $18, while public fast chargers along the way push it toward the price of gas. The figure most worth keeping is the cost per mile. A car costs about 56 cents a mile, and fuel is only 13 of them. The other 43 cents, mostly depreciation, runs the entire time whether or not it is counted. New York to Miami was never a $200 drive. It is a $700 drive that begins with $200 of gas. If the full cost of a route is the kind of thing you want before booking the next one, subscribe. We run the real numbers on a new route every week.